Sure. Oh, my internet's decided it's not very happy. And I think we are live. Hopefully, yeah, I think we are. I think we're good. Okie doke. So, welcome to Newscast 5 for Therapy Live, and I'm very happy to be joined by most of the speakers from the core skills section. We'll talk about core skills later. I've got Heather Watson, Pete Moore, Shane Lowe, Matthew Wyatt, Maddie Nicholson, and Katie Napton with me this evening. After last week's terrible showing of drink, I've got water this time instead of that terrible gin and lemonade, which was pretty awful. But never mind, hopefully this will all go nice and swimmingly. So what we're going to do is we're going to go around each of the speakers and just get them to introduce their topic that they're speaking about. And then we'll pretty much go from there. So one of the things we wanted to do when we made the therapy live streams was to create a section where we reframed what the word core, because no one really likes that anymore. So what we wanted to do was to fit those things in, some talks into core skills that we thought actually they maybe are overlooked skills within therapies, but actually probably do make up quite a good central section of skill sets that we should have. And you'll see from the speakers that we've got within this session, and unfortunately we're missing a couple tonight, couldn't make it. But really going to get across some really broad topics that are going to make everybody a lot better in practice, hopefully. So what I want to do, I'm going to start with the order that's on my screen. So that's you, Heather, unfortunately. You're on the top left of my screen as I look. So just introduce your session for us and what we hopefully will be getting out of that.
Okay, well, thanks very much, Jack, and obviously thank you for being invited to speak at the event. It's obviously going to be a really interesting way to deliver a massive conference. So yeah, I'm going to be speaking about functional rehabilitation principles for return to work or life and play. We talk about work and play and all the things that can incorporate. And I think it is a really timely thing to be speaking about in the current climate. We have a really wide range of clients who need a lot of support to get back to normal function. And of course, in our usual work, that might be recovery from a specific injury or a specific operation. It might be recovery from a general illness. And what we're looking at is applying these principles broadly. And what I want to do with this session is to create a little bit of a framework so that those principles can be applied regardless of the reason the person needs it, across clinical boundaries. So it isn't about saying this only applies to musculoskeletal, or it only applies to pain, or it only applies to neurological conditions. These principles apply across every type of clinical presentation. And often actually, of course, in the world that I work in, we deal with polytrauma and multiple injury. So we often have people with multiple things going on and comorbidities underlying that. So we have to be very pragmatic in applying our rehabilitation. And then I think the other aspect of that that is great about this conference is that those principles go across those professions as well. This isn't owned by any one profession, and in fact it works best when all the professionals involved in a person's care are working to the same principles, and because then you're all speaking the same language, working from the same starting place. And as well, it's really important to say that functional rehabilitation to me is about very much an individualized rehab plan and very specific to the context and needs of that client. So of course the client and the patient is also absolutely central to that. And I know Pete will touch in a minute on self-management, but self-management is a major part of a functional rehab plan as well. So what I hope that my session will do is give that framework, give an introduction to some of the tools that are out there, and show people how they can start to bring together a functional rehab plan, no matter where they're working, no matter what their professional background, and what they might like to do with these skills going forward.
Yeah, sounds great. I mean, don't need me, do you? Segues perfectly into Pete. That, but I think it is something that we all need to consider. Isn't it? I don't know if any time in my physio career I've had to consider these factors that we're going through now, where even working in outpatients, we might have to be then rehabbing people that are having issues from what is essentially a respiratory issue. So that's, I certainly don't remember having to consider those things, and I think your talk's going to lend itself lovely to that.
Yeah, we're going to make sure that we, you know, these skills can be applied across the board, because I think, you know, more and more where we might have been working in our little department only looking at one kind of problem, more and more we're going to see those comorbidities, and now we've got another group of patients for whom nobody has any experience of rehab, and we're really going to have to apply principles rather than knowledge and experience, because we don't have all that yet.
Yeah, exactly. And Pete, I mean, like we said, it leads you perfectly onto what I think you're going to be talking about. So do you want to introduce what your, I mean, I don't know if anybody's going to have any wild guesses away from what your topic might be, but hopefully there's going to be a bit of a different slant this time, isn't there?
Yeah, I'm going to be talking about the Arsenal.
Yeah. I hope that as long as it links in somehow, you go with whatever you want.
While we're struggling to self score and whatnot. Good evening, everyone, and thanks very much for the intro, Jack, and thanks for the lead in, Heather. I have your was in the post, by the way. Hey, listen, yeah, I mean, listen, I'm not a healthcare professional. I'm just I call myself a normal dude, really. And I seem to sort of bumped into self-management along the way with my own problems along the way. But listen, the one thing I want to be talking about on the conference is my strapline really is pain self-management your first choice or last resort? Now that's a question I asked both people who are living with pain, but I also ask it to mainly healthcare professionals, because it seems to me, especially with coming from the aiming at healthcare professionals, it's something that doesn't seem to be something that you're not told about, engaged with while you're in physio school, nursing school, doctor school, and whatever schools you've attended to become a healthcare professional. It seems that the medical model is king still, pretty much. I know there are some schools out there that are including it now, but they're very few and far between. So I know with talking to healthcare professionals over the years, say that they told me something that it's an add-on that they have to learn when they leave their schools, etc. So they struggle a little bit. So really, it's about I want to give you some just simple ideas really on how you can start engaging with people. Just giving people just 5 ideas really on self-management, etc. From a person's point of view, any people with pain watching is they struggle because it's always seems to be offered to them as a last resort. You know, like, well, Mrs. Smith, I've sent you to the physio, I've sent to this one. You know, you come very well versed now in the where all the departments are now at the hospital. And but guess what? I'm afraid I've run out. You're going to have to learn how to live with it. You know, and it's like asking me to go and learn how to ride a rocket ship. Like, you know, it's not going to happen. So really, it's about how you start. It's about switching them back on again. The thing with self-management is getting people back in the driving seat. At the moment, you know, a lot of people, while we're struggling in the UK with 28 million people living with pain, over 500,000 stuck in opioids, because self-management isn't out there at the forefront. So I'm going to give you some really simple ideas on how you can start that conversation off with the people that you see. As always, it's all easy peasy lemon squeezy. So I'll see you soon on the conference.
Yeah, it is, isn't it? Do you think, so it just occurred to me, Pete, do you think that self-management, the phrase self-management, it's got a bit of almost like a negative connotation to it because of what you just described? So if you go to a therapist and you're like, oh, they said I need to self-manage, do you think that now that's got a bit of a negative connotation and we need to flip it round to, like you said, on being more on the front end?
Yeah, well, you know, I mean, I might go back to 20 odd years now, and it's not a phrase that was said to me 20 odd years ago when I was sort of just, you know, struggling with my back pain and whatnot. So really, to me, it's still a fairly new phase that sort of kicked in over the last 15 or so, perhaps years. So, but it's not if you are someone, I mean, I always remember a few years ago, I was up at a British Pain Society ASM in Liverpool. I was having the same conversation with the doctor. I said, look, you know, the terminology that you guys use, we've never been to med school. So it's, you know, you've got to nod it down, you know, so that we understand it. And I said, you know, so it takes self-management, for example. What does that mean? Anyway, but there was a kid over there who was one of them sort of security dudes, like, you know. So I said, come over here, son. I said, look, you got back pain, and I told you you're going to have to go and self-manage. I said, what would you do? He said, I'll go and see the GP. You know, so it's not self-management, so it isn't really in our vocabulary, but it's something, again, see, that's been passed on from somewhere around in your sort of area, really. But it's not, and we all use it, I use it, but really for normal, I think people in the street, it's not a phrase that they would recognise. So, you know, perhaps it's somewhere along the line, and that's why I try and use terminology of like getting people back in the driving seat so they get that. And in a way, it's about putting him back in control. So it's about using terminology. That's what I try and hit on the conference in a couple of weeks' time. So yeah, it's just you know what, just keep it simple. You know, but you guys, you complicate it. I don't know why.
Makes us sound clever, Pete. That's the only thing we've got. I think, unfortunately, Mike Stewart's not here with us, but I think he'll be talking a lot about analogies and metaphors, and that'll map again. It's a shame he's not in Shane's spot where I could just move smoothly into ask Mike about what he's going to talk about. But instead, we're going to take a bit of a jump to Shane on a slightly different topic. But Shane's. I always mispronounce the company name, but Vitru, is that right? Yeah.
Yeah, appreciate that.
No worries, I've been practicing. So they're coming along, and one of the vendors at the event as well. And Shane's going to talk on, I don't know, it might be a little bit of a controversial subject, but hopefully he'll avoid anything too raucous when on the day. But do you want to introduce us into a little bit about what you're going to talk about, Shane?
Sure, and I hope I do bring some spirited conversation. Controversy is okay. So yeah, my name is Shane Lowe. I'm the CEO of a startup company in London who develop motion capture technology for daily practice in musculoskeletal care. And I'm not a physiotherapist, I'm an engineer by background, but my PhD is in biomechanics, and I spent about 10 years now building biomechanics technology. And I'm going to be joined on the day by our clinical lead, who is an amazing physiotherapist, to talk about that clinical validity and clinical usefulness side. So what we're talking about is the use of motion capture in daily practice. Motion capture technology and similar technologies are pretty standard now in academia and academic studies. I think it's fair to say they haven't made it into widespread adoption, and there's good reasons for that. So we're going to talk about the realities of existing technology and the limitations, usability being a big one, the time it takes to set it up, the fact that it often interrupts that crucial patient-clinician interaction, all of these different things that my field of engineering hasn't done a good enough job at fixing for this technology. We're also going to talk about why we want to fix those things, what's the clinical relevance, and what can we do to help clinicians. So there's giving you better evidence and more sensitive outcome measures to help plan your rehab and to spot kind of plateaus in recovery. But there's also the patient engagement side, providing them with that kind of quantitative data that's completely objective to get them on board. And then there's also a section that's particularly relevant in these days as physio clinics are up against it, coming back from this big challenge of COVID, which is things like extra revenue streams and what you can do to help commercially in this world. So we'll talk about the limitations, the strengths, and then hopefully when you leave, you'll know where things are now and where things are in the next 2 years, 3 years, and why they're going to be in a much better place for physiotherapists.
Yeah, I think it's going to be a really interesting session. I'm definitely going to try and get myself into, because I think for me, there's a lot against people doing motion analysis, let's say, not necessarily motion capture, but biomechanics analysis, and there's a lot of limitations with that. But also, I think that if I think back to a lot of the physios I've met, I don't know how many physios have actually used motion capture technology in the past. So was lucky enough, I went to a university once who had some, and we stuck the little golf balls on, not golf balls, ping pong balls, and did motion capture that way. But obviously that's not practical for clinic necessarily, but you get some really fascinating results. So it'd be a really good talk to get into about, like you said, the clinical applicability, because I think that's where the real difficulty comes, is to make sure it's useful in clinic, isn't it?
Yeah, and I think if you look at the kind of technology we have out there right now, you have that set up where it takes you 40 minutes to set a patient up, you attach the 50 little balls to the patient, and then at the outcome, you get 400 graphs, which aren't particularly easy to interpret. It takes you 3 days to get through and anything useful clinically from them. So it's our job in the world of technology to boil that down to follow your clinical practice. So whatever functional movements that you're doing, whatever assessments you're doing, making that seamless, and basically take the same data as you guys are taking with your site, just helping you to do it in that kind of really sensitive, really high-tech way. So improving the data without having to revolutionize the way you do your practice.
Sounds good to me. Matthew, we've talked about whether Matt Phillips is around to ask you any difficult questions, but so this is your introduction to trying to head him off now.
Thanks, Jack. Right, well, having tackled the supposedly impossible question of defining clinical excellence in the MSKR manifesto, I thought I'd go through a new challenge. So I've got no working group this time. I'm just going to take on the biopsychosocial model on my own. I'm going to talk about the pendulum, or more importantly, I'm going to talk about why there is no bloody pendulum. It's certainly not swung anywhere. What my premise of my talk is going to be that the biopsychosocial model is a clinical framework, clinical reasoning framework based on the N=1 concept. I'm going to draw heavily on the works of Matt Lowe, Ben Cormack, patient advocates like Pete Moore, Adrienne Reger, Jolita Belton, some of my colleagues, Steve Noir, Graham Wilkes, probably dip into the knowledge translation framework from Peter O'Sullivan et al. And basically, I think I'm going to cover red flag, system thinking, language and culture, values, society, work, the cause of the cause and what we can learn from GPs, ideas, concerns, expectations, past treatments, including failed back surgery and failed physiotherapy, in the context of not being a dick, quoting Jolita Belton. Going to probably touch on training age, avoiding the broken escalator and keeping people in the driving seat. Talk about hands-on and probably hairdressers. So yeah, no problem.
So after you've read out all the things you're going to cover, you're going to get any meat in the presentation?
That's my slide headings covered.
Do you feel like there's going to be controversy in your talk, or do you feel like you're going to be preaching to the masses?
It's difficult to know. That the Twitter echo chamber is probably going to nod along, but I think actually this conference is going to be hopefully bigger than that and get a wider audience. So I think some of it might be controversial, and some people might disagree with it.
Be interesting to see, won't it? Hopefully it will be big. 13,500 speakers we've got, or 13,500 attendees. So across seven or eight streams at the same time, you're liable to have at least 1,000 people in each talk. So it should be really good.
No pressure.
No pressure at all. Maddie, your talk, and again, a bit like Pete, I don't think anybody's going to take any wild misses at guessing what your topic's going to be. But I think for me, it's one that's going to knit a lot of topics together. So do you want to tell us a little bit about what you're going to be talking about?
Yeah. So yeah, listening to Heather and Pete and Matthew, yeah, it feels like it might be a way of tying all things together. Motivational interviewing, it's just one way of thinking about behaviour change, so it's not the way. But yeah, as a conversational style to help people and facilitate people moving towards change, then it seems to sort of tie in with a few of the things talked about here. So yeah, in terms of where I'm going with it, I like to, leave it nearer to the time to get a bit more inspiration. But that's just how I work. But my ponderings have been, when we listen to patients, are our ears tuned into their talk about change? And when we hear that, what do we do with that? do we reflect, talk about change, or sometimes do we take it in a different direction? So how can we facilitate that and build that up? Off the back of what Pete was saying.
I feel like I genuinely have not put any thought into the schedule of how the talks are going, other than we gave everybody a question as to whether they'd like to speak in the morning or the afternoon, and then I've just fitted people into slots. But now I'm thinking with this stream, I should have thought harder about how I ran each section, because I think it would have gone in a really nice flow. So it'll be a bit potluck, but hopefully everybody will be making that jump. Do you think, Maddie, I always think with motivational interviewing, is there any utility with it, like with what Pete was saying, where those more initial conversations, so you might not necessarily be into change, but more the questioning about where people are at the time, what's the utility there for motivational interview? Because I get the sort of, for me, I can fit it sort of simply a little bit later, but I think when I listen to your podcast, which you did with us, you were talking more about getting it earlier, and I still struggle a bit with that. That's probably just the way that I am.
Okay.
How does it fit earlier? And if so, can you teach me how to do it just in the next 2 minutes?
Yeah, whistle stop tour. Okay. So yeah, with MI, they talk about the processes. So engage, focus, evoke, and plan. So Pete was talking there about the engagement phase, and that's what you were referring to in the podcast. So yeah, you would use your micro skills to create that engagement and build that relationship and that empathy, that sort of environment. Then you would use your skills to focus. Okay, so what matters to you, if you like? What do you see? Where do you see us focusing the conversation, for example? Then that would then perfectly move on to evoking talk about change from someone, and then move on to the planning bit, which was what you were talking about, saying you got your head around that bit. Having said that, naturally we move to and fro from these processes. So it might be that you get to evoking talk about change from someone, and then you need to go back to the engagement again for whatever reason. So it's not linear, you can kind of dance around them.
See, I like straight lines, so
yeah, sorry.
Maybe
going that way.
It was good. Then you reverted back. No worries. I'm sure, like going back to Matthews with his clinical reasoning, he'll be doing nice straight lines. Clinically reasoning, we're going to go from point A to point B. No, no good.
No, suits my more scattered approach. But no, there's definitely a process there. But it's really listening to the person that you're talking to and seeing where they're at and moving with that. You might want to go this way, and you might jointly set an agenda, and they take it that way, and you have to respect that.
Perfect. And then last but not least, Katie at the bottom of my screen here. Again, a little bit like Maddie's, really. It's something that's going to tie a lot of things together in this current situation, talking about video calls and video therapy. So tell us a little bit about that, because you obviously have a rich history of doing that well before COVID-19 was ever invented.
Yes, so I suppose
that was more controversial than I meant, actually. Sorry, it wasn't invented.
Yeah. No, so I'm sort of qualified to, I think, to speak about this, in that I set up a PhysioFirst Online, which was purely video consultations company for some interesting reactions from fellow physios at the time. So what I'm hoping to talk about is all things video consultations, but not how to do them. I think we've got a wealth of fantastic videos that lots of people have done. So I'm not planning to reinvent that. There's no need. Most people by now have done more than a few. But really, it's why I still think it's so great, and why hopefully moving forwards we'd be able to keep it going. Also, just perhaps thinking the bigger picture. So I think lots of people just had to rush in to do them, but thinking of the policies and procedures that you might need in place, if you're thinking of them being a viable option further on. I've become quite dull with standard operative procedures and have quite a few. I thought I'd probably whiz through some case studies, just of one particular interest, and some that have been over a longer period of time, because as you've already said, that I've done this pre-COVID. Also, perhaps outcome measures, what I found useful. I'm trying to gather quite a lot of data and planning to then release and actually have some information and have some feedback. Obviously, my data varies a bit because I had people who chose to have video consultations, which gives a little bit of a different tilt on it all. And then what else was I thinking about? No, I was, oh, and they're just talking about it in terms of not only MSK. So we're, you know, offering neurology services, offering some peds, offering some women's health stuff. So there's lots that it can do. I think it's really exciting, and obviously it's something that I'm quite happy to share with people.
Brilliant. Yeah, looking forward to that one as well. I do a lot of talking over the phone, but I don't have video, so it'll be interesting to get your take on that. Having not used video for the consultations, I was just thinking how we could merge everybody's talk into one go, and it would be something like using motivational interviewing on a video to do functional rehab to talk about self-management, and then somehow using motion capture to help, and clinically reasoning all of that, Matthew. So I just want to ask anybody that's watching, if you've got any questions for the speakers, then do put them in, and then I'll put them to these guys and see what their thoughts are. But just while we're waiting for any questions to come in, I just wanted to ask you any other. We've obviously got a lot of talks going on, and some of them will obviously clash with while you're speaking. But any that anybody's particularly looking forward to jumping into to watch. Let's start with you, Matthew, as you're in the dead center. Let's go to you, and then we'll span out from there.
Yeah, that's the $1 million question, isn't it? Which other talks are you going to go to? You've got to register in the first place, Heather, though. No. I think I'm pretty public in my interest in terms of rehab, so I think probably I'll hang out on the rehab strand, and I begged to get into the rehab strand and wasn't allowed to speak in that strand, so I'll go and indulge all my biases, although I might push myself out of the comfort zone and go somewhere else as well, and challenge myself one or two occasions.
Perfect. Pete, anybody you're particularly looking forward to? Have you had a look at the speaker stream yet?
Not really. I haven't. No, I've been, you know, I've been busy with my webinars really. So I've been. But if I had to go to anyone, I'd probably go to Maddie's one, because, not because Maddie was one on the webinars, but it's, to me, that's key. You know, it's that how you connect with people from the get-go. Because if you can't connect with people, mate, you where you going? You know, you ain't going to go anywhere. So I think, you know, I really enjoyed the webinar I did with Annie the other day, and it gave me sort of give me some food for thought, really. So if anything, I'd like to improve my skills a little bit more on how I engage with people, because sometimes that engages before that. So it's using these two babies and get one a breather, you know.
Exactly. Maddie, as we're talking about you, who are you looking forward to seeing? Anybody in particular?
I think the pelvic health stuff, because I think if I was going to admit to it, it's something that I've tended to shy away from. So yeah, looking at that side of things would be.
Yeah,
good.
that's my pick for the most popular stream, I think, actually.
Okay, well, there you go.
for the whole day, I think that's going to have the heaviest watcher list. Heather, up in the top left, anybody you're particularly looking forward to watching?
And again, I have to confess that I haven't really had a really good look at all the speakers. We've had a mega few months of busyness with COVID, so we're really just. We're just carrying on at breakneck speed now, heading to Therapy Live. So yeah, it's all full on. But I will be having a look. I'm going to have a look at the exercise rehab stream, because again, that's obviously one of my little personal interests. And the business stream, I believe, that's going to be becoming available. I'm really going to be interested in that as well. Obviously, being a business owner myself. So yes, I've just registered, and I'm going to have a good nosy through, and I'll start, you know, deciding what's going to happen. And the other thing I think Matt alluded to earlier, and some will remember that, you know, Matt and I did a stream at one of the big R's about, you know, what do you need in your skill set to deliver good rehab? And, you know, one of the things that we're looking at very much now is competencies, standards for physios in order to, you know, deliver these sorts of services competently. So, you know, if there's anything going on that, I'll be wanting to have a look in there too.
Perfect. Shane, anything that you're particularly interested in?
Yeah, sure. So my own interest is around the kind of functional rehab and functional assessment side. So from Heather's talk to Ollie Coburn has one called "What Do You Mean by Functional?", which I think is a great title for a talk, so I'm definitely going to hit that on. And then there's using data to make informed rehab decisions, one as well that I'm really keen to see.
Yeah, I think you might struggle with that because I think Heather and Ollie are on at the same time. So, so I might be a bit of a clash there. And then Katie, finally with you, yourself.
Well, yeah, I haven't, and the same as a lot of the speakers, I haven't had a huge amount of time, but I'm a great fan of Elaine Miller and the pelvic health side of things. So yeah, and I will be interested to have a nose at the business side as well.
Yeah, we haven't really.
Sorry, that's right. Open to all of them.
Yeah, we haven't really released the business side of things just quite yet. It's been a little bit of a slower one to get people confirmed into their talk titles and things, but it's going to be some really strong content in there, which is going to be really good. I'm disappointed that no one mentioned they want to come to my talk on in the upper limb, so I can easily move you all to first thing in the morning or clash. Because I have control over the timetable, but no worries. I think I'm biased. I think the whole thing's going to be really good. So hopefully we'll get some really good conversations going. As Maddie said, get people out of their comfort zone for some different talks and really get some good learning in. So we've got a question come in from Evie, which is I think directed at Katie. How can we physios as a profession encourage patients to use video consultations?
That's not a challenge, is it?
You've got 1 minute, go.
By encouraging physios to engage fully that video consultations have a place and they have a value. There is still place for hands-on manual therapy, but video has a huge value, and but yeah, obviously I'm sold on the idea, but it needs to come from us.
Yeah, I'd be interested on your thoughts there, Pete. I mean, obviously, I'm going to make an assumption that video consultations weren't that common when you first started back in healthcare a few years ago. What would
that common?
what from your point of view, what would sort of what would encourage patient engagement to more video consultations? Because they're, as Katie said, they've got some great benefits.
Yeah, I love it. I mean, to me, I do all my stuff now. All my workshops are on online, and so the webinars and the meetings and whatnot. I think it's about change, really. A lot of people getting people to actually change. Don't forget, people have been used to seeing people for God knows donkey's years, like from time began, like So, but the thing is, I think what if there's going to take away any pluses really with this COVID thing, is where it's actually where people had to talk to their healthcare professional via a phone or video or whatnot, like But I think it's to me, I think it's massively the future, really, because what I like about it, it's just saves going. I mean, I had my oncology appointment the other week just by telephone. I loved it because it saved me all the grief of driving all the way to Harwich, to Clacton, parking 3 kilometres away from the hospital to walk there. And you're in that environment where I was having that consultation on my own home, where I felt more relaxed, actually, So to me, I think it's the future, really, and I think more people will do it. And I asked my practice nurse the other day, how's it been with people having been going? And I said, no problem at all. I said, well, perhaps if they want to show you something, they send me a photo, So, and it's I always think, well, what about the old people? Well, I'm an old person, I'm doing this stuff. My neighbour next door, she's in her 80s. She loves her iPad. She orders her meds for it, So yeah, okay, there's going to be a few older people out there ain't into this sort of stuff, but look, everybody's walking around with one of these bad boys now, So it's easy peasy lemon squeezy. Give it time.
They're going to evolve into being stuck into our hands soon, aren't they? Like you just be born with it, with an iPhone, or other phones are available, and stuck to your hand, aren't you? Matthew, can you give us an insight? Because obviously you're with Connect Health. I'm assuming you've been doing virtual consultations on a much larger scale than the rest of us have been doing. What sort of have there been any particular challenges getting the therapists on board?
Yeah, well, I was going to make a few points on that and listen to the others talk. I think the first point I would make is that all our talks, which are core skills, essential skills, whatever you want to call them, all the speakers tonight have listed, could we not do via virtual consultation? Particularly and Pete's already said it, the biggest tool that we've got available to us as clinicians is these big boys. So absolutely, and Pete said it again, everybody's got the devices. So in my experience, actually, the clinicians are the laggards and the patients are the early adopters around that. Look at Babylon Health and GP at Hand, incredibly successful because people don't want to go to appointments. We want them to come to appointments. They don't want to come. So exactly that, it's getting people to understand that. And in some ways, I think COVID has really pushed that agenda forward and made us become much more progressive than that, because we've had to change our practices. And I, for one, hope we don't ever go back again to back to better, I think is the term Anu Jaggi's coined. I'd like to think we're going to do that.
I think Shane's nodding along like he's glad he's got rid of the ping pong balls because he didn't have to post them all out to people.
You know, we've been a very face-to-face, very location intensive service, going out to see people in their homes. And what's coming across more and more as we've taken all our services remote during this period. We did that straight away. We were already on with it, thankfully. But what's coming really to the fore is that skills like motivational interviewing are now going to be absolutely critical to eliciting the discussions that you need when you're remote, that you can't absorb the same information by being in a space with somebody. You know, you can't use your vision to the same extent, you can't take in the environment to the same extent, and therefore being able to have a skilled conversation and guiding that is much more going to be much more critical. So you know, we're really looking to learn more about how to integrate motivational interviewing into our assessment, into our rehab approaches.
I'm thinking of a way Maddie's going to say that motivational interviewing can encourage the therapists and the patients to take video calling on board.
Exactly. Yeah.
Evoke that change.
There you go. Yeah. What do you know about telehealth? How do you think about it?
Yeah, that's a good talk on its own, isn't it? Brilliant. So we've not got any further questions coming from the crowd. I don't know if anybody's got any questions for any of the other speakers while we're on. This is your chance. No, perfect. Right. So I'm delighted that you all spent your evening talking to me and promoting this, and hopefully it's going to be a really good day. I mean, I can't believe anybody's watching and hasn't got a ticket yet, unless they've had their head in the sand somewhere. But if anybody doesn't, then you can head to therapy-live.co.uk and get a ticket from there. The full agenda should be out on Friday. He says it's mostly done. So it should be out on Friday, so people can start planning their day, and we can all start planning on who we're going to go and watch while we're not doing our own talk. And all the sessions will be available recorded afterwards as well. We'll get that turned around really quickly. That'll all be on therapistlearning.com for access afterwards. So if you do miss, there are clashes, then you'll be able to watch them back afterwards. So that should be really good. But otherwise, we'll all get writing our presentations, and they'll be ready in time, fingers crossed. And otherwise, like Pete said, we'll all see you then on the day. So thank you very much for joining me, you guys.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Bye. Bye.
Ciao. Ciao.